After battling cancer for the last 10 years, I've studied the research obsessively. 90% of cancers are preventable. Well, these are 4 common foods that create an environment where cancer cells thrive. And here's what the science actually shows. First of all, this is educational content based on published research and personal experience. I'm not a medical doctor. Cancer is never your fault. Always consult your oncologist or your healthcare provider for medical advice. If you're new to the channel, my name is Gary B, and I've been obsessed with longevity. I've worked with the biggest doctors in longevity, and I've also had a long history battling my own cancer diagnosis from 13 years ago. So I thought cancer was just bad luck and it's bad genes. And then I got diagnosed and had to rebuild my entire life. While going through treatment and recovery, I read every research paper I could find about the relationship between food and cancer growth. And I'm sure if you're like me, you've done the same thing. The data shocked me. Certain foods don't directly cause cancer, but they create the metabolic environment where abnormal cells survive and they thrive. High blood sugar, chronic inflammation, weakened immune surveillance. These are the conditions that cancer loves. And modern diets actually support these conditions every day. Okay, here's the science you need to know. Up to 90% of cancers are preventable through lifestyle factors. Cancers rely heavily on glucose and growth signals, insulin and IGF-1. Chronic inflammation weakens immune surveillance. Your food choices either support or suppress cancer cell growth. Patterns over time matter way more than a single meal. I want to start by saying something really important. You cannot change the genes you were born with, but you can absolutely influence how those genes behave. One of the most powerful ways to do that, how you eat every single day. Because cancer is not just a genetic disease, it's a metabolic disease. It's deeply connected to your immune system and it grows in an environment. I learned this through training and research, but I learned it much more personal way during my own diagnosis. When you're sitting in an oncologist's office and then you're going through chemo, when you're watching your body fight for survival, you start asking very different questions. Not why me, but what can I control? And here's what the research shows. Certain foods quietly create an environment where cancer cells thrive. None of this means any specific food directly causes cancer, but food absolutely influences whether abnormal cells are supported or suppressed. Once I understood that, I stopped looking at food like it was moral or emotional. I started looking at it as information. I eat to survive and thrive now. Let me explain the biology for a minute because it's critical. Cancer begins when a normal cell becomes abnormal. That means that happens all the time. Mutations happen constantly in your body. Most of the time, your immune system catches these abnormal cells and it clears them out. That's what your body is designed to do. But the problem isn't the mutation itself. The problem is an environment that allows abnormal cells to survive and grow. You see, cancer cells need fuel. They rely heavily on glucose, sugar, and that's what they need to grow. They respond strongly to growth signals like insulin and IGF-1. They benefit from inflammation and weakened immune surveillance. They love when protective barriers break down in your body. They need a blood supply, which they get through angiogenesis. Basically, they trick your body into building blood vessels to feed them oxygen and nutrients, those little buggers. And when these conditions are persistent and continuous, that's when cancer takes advantage. Unfortunately, many of the foods that create this environment are incredibly common. Modern diets support these conditions all the time. Let's talk about the specific foods you need to know about. I'm sure you heard this one many, many times. Processed foods, the inflammatory factory. One of the biggest contributors is processed foods, especially foods high in salt. When I say processed foods, I mean foods that come in packaging that have a long ingredients list and are designed for shelf stability and are very convenient and very, very tasty. These foods are typically high in sodium, low in fiber, and stripped of the protective compounds that whole foods provides. Here's what most people don't know. Excess sodium doesn't just affect blood pressure. High sodium intake is linked to increased inflammation. It changes your gut microbiome. It damages the lining in your stomach over time. And that chronic irritation and inflammation, that increases your risk of cancer, particularly cancers of the digestive tract. Here's the other problem. Highly processed foods crowd out whole foods. So when your diet is dominated by packaged foods, you almost always eat fewer vegetables, fewer lean proteins, fewer fruits, and that means you're missing out on fiber and essential micronutrients. That matters because fiber plays a major role in blood sugar control. Fiber reduces inflammation. Fiber supports immune health. So processed foods don't just add harmful exposures, they reduce protective exposures too. This is really critical. So after my own diagnosis, I went through my pantry and threw out everything with more than 5 ingredients I couldn't pronounce, and I was shocked at how much I had to go through. If you're like me and you grew up in the 60s on Tang and Space food sticks, you understand how processed foods slowly crept into our diets. Another major contributor is sugar-sweetened drinks. Liquid sugar is one of the fastest ways to spike your blood sugar and insulin. And unlike solid foods, sugary drinks don't make you feel full. You can consume massive amounts very quickly before your body tells you to stop. Cancer cells are metabolically different from healthy cells. Healthy cells are efficient. They use oxygen. They generate energy in an imbalanced way. Many cancer cells behave like inefficient engines. They burn through glucose rapidly. So when your blood sugar spikes, insulin goes up, IGF rises. These hormones send strong growth signals. Sugar-sweetened drinks create the perfect storm. They deliver fuel quickly and they amplify the growth signals. Over time, those repeated blood sugar spikes create chronic inflammation that further weakens your immune system. This is why sugary drinks are consistently associated with higher cancer risk, especially when consumed regularly over months and years. During my own recovery, I cut out all sugary drinks completely, every single one. If I want something sweet, I eat whole fruit. At least there's fiber to slow the glucose spike. It was one of the hardest changes I made, but also one of the most important. Another exposure that doesn't get nearly enough attention, charred foods. Yes, I was craving charred foods for years. When food is cooked at very high temperatures, especially charring, grilling, or pan frying, chemical compounds from that create that blackened look. These compounds, heterocyclic amines and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, if you want the technical terms, try to say that 5 times fast. Well, they actually damage DNA and they promote the cancer growth. This doesn't mean you can never barbecue or grill anything ever again. I still grill, but I'm strategic about it and how often. I marinate my meats first, which actually reduces compound formation. I flip them frequently. I cut off the heavily charred parts, and I don't eat charred foods every single day. Frequent consumption of heavily charred foods increases your risk, and that exposure adds up over time. This is about patterns, not perfection. You see, before my diagnosis, I was grilling steaks to the point where they were almost black. I thought that's how you got the flavor. Well, now I know a little better. And then there's alcohol. The science on this is very clear, and I know y'all don't want to hear this, but it's also very consistent. Alcohol is now classified as a Group 1 carcinogen by the World Health Organization, the same category as tobacco and asbestos. It increases the risk of 11 types of cancer: breast, colon, liver, throat, mouth, esophagus. The list goes on and on. Alcohol is metabolized into acetaldehyde, a compound that is directly toxic to our DNA. It interferes with DNA repair. It depletes key nutrients. It weakens immune function. On top of that, alcohol increases inflammation and acts as a solvent, making it easier for other carcinogens to enter your tissues. This doesn't mean that everyone who drinks will get cancer. I know y'all have that story of your grandma who lived to be 96, smoking cigarettes and drinking bourbon her whole life. But the large studies consistently show alcohol is dose dependent. The more you consume, the higher your risk. For cancer survivors and people who want to stay cancer-free, this is some of the clearest data that we have. I stopped drinking completely after my diagnosis, not because my doctor demanded it, because I read the research and I made a choice. Was it easy? No. I loved a good glass of wine with dinner, but I love being alive a lot more. Here's what I want you to take from all of this. It's not fear-mongering, but it's awareness. Food is not neutral. It sends signals. Highly processed food, sugary drink, charred foods, alcohol, these send signals that support inflammation growth and metabolic distress. When those signals are repeated every day, they create an environment where cancer thrives. You don't need to be perfect, nobody is, but you absolutely need to be strategic and intentional. Cancer risk is not determined by one meal or one food or one choice. It's shaped by patterns over time. I don't eat perfectly, but I eat with intention. I ask myself, is this meal supporting my health or working against it? Most of the time, not all the time, I choose support. And on the days that I don't beat myself up about it. I just make a different choice for the next meal. This is not about fear or restriction or food morality. This is about giving your body the best possible environment to stay healthy and to stay strong. So now that you understand that food can support cancer growth, what do you actually do? Well, first, don't panic. Don't throw out your entire kitchen tonight. Start with one change. Maybe it's swapping sugary drinks for water or unsweetened tea. Maybe it's adding more vegetables to your meals. Maybe it's cutting back on heavily processed snacks. Small changes compound over time. Second, if you're serious about cancer prevention or you're a survivor like me, I've created a complete guide on what I eat every day to stay cancer-free. It's linked in the description below. It's free and it's based on the same research I'm sharing right here. Third, get your blood work done. Know your markers. Inflammation markers like CRP, blood sugar markers like A1C, and fasting glucose immune function markers. You can't manage what you don't measure. And finally, share this video with someone you love because people you care about deserve to know this information too. If this resonated with you, hit the subscribe button. I make these evidence-based deep dives for people who refuse to accept disease as inevitable. Drop a comment and tell me which of these foods are you going to change first. I read every single comment. Until next time, stay strong, stay informed, and remember, you still have more control than you think.